Review, and then we're going to jump into property rights, but we need to understand libertarianism to get into property rights. Okay, private property, right? So here we go. Utilitarianism means the greatest good for the greatest number of people. That means you try to make the most people happy. If there are 10 people and you can make 9 of them happy, you win. That one person, sorry, right? It's not good to be a minority in utilitarianism. And that means just there are 9 people who are the same, and then there's one person like you, right? So if you're the kind of person who likes metal and the world is set up for utilitarianism in music, you're doomed because most people dislike metal very much, right? So that's a utilitarian art thing. Bentham had act utilitarianism, where every time you play music, you have to think about everybody involved. Every time you buy food, you have to think about everything, right? And Mill changed it to rule utilitarianism, which was basically trying to create rules that will bring about the greatest good for the greatest number of people, right? You try to follow laws that will give everybody the most pleasure and the least pain. Give the most people the most pleasure and the least people, the least pain. It was all about math. Libertarianism guarantees rights and promotes individual freedom, right? Libertarianism, Isarat Pop, it's all about freedom, right? Okay. So John Locke was a social contract theorist, and we're going to talk about private property today through his philosophy, and he's the OG libertarian. He's an OG social contract theorist, and so when we think about record contracts, the ethics of record contracts, the roots go back to Locke and what he wrote. The roots of the Declaration of Independence in the United States go back to Locke and what he wrote. They basically just plagiarized it from him, and he was an Englishman, the enemy. All right. So let's review virtue ethics a little bit. I don't have anything on Aristotle. You have to go back and watch Aristotle again. But his cool idea was the middle path of ethics, right? You can be too courageous. It's called being stupid. And you can be not courageous enough, and that's called being a coward, right? But Kant, we maybe need some review about, okay? So here's Kant's deontological ethics. Here's Kant's categorical imperative. Now here's some things about him. He was a German. He was into virtue ethics. His thing was the categorical imperative. And he said that morality is not in the result. Morality is in the action and the intention behind the action, right? Utilitarianism is all about the consequence. What's going to make the most people happy? I don't care how we do it. We just got to get that done. And then libertarianism is not consequentialist because they're about freedom, right? Kant was not consequentialist either. He doesn't care what happens. It's about what you do and what you try to do, right? Remember when Taylor Swift was poisoning Justin Bieber? She ends up saving his life, but she wanted to kill him. According to Kant, bad action because she was trying to murder him. But if you're a utilitarian and you want the world to be smarter and they have less Justin Bieber, bad joke. Okay. Only bad jokes. Only bad jokes. So, the categorical imperative. You can remember when Michael Sandel said things are categorically wrong. It means wrong all the time, right? Murder is categorically wrong. If you're a vegetarian, you say eating meat is categorically wrong, right? You believe that the action is wrong all the time. So the categorical imperative is like this. It draws strong distinctions. It says this is always the way it is, right? No exceptions. A maxim is a rule that's like a giant rule that you hold. I don't murder people, right? I don't lie. I don't. You try to hold to a maxim. An axiom is like a maxim, but it's in words. For its own sake means you don't do it for another reason. You just do it for that, right? And so you can use these in your papers. For its own sake means like if you're not into practicing just to get better, but you practice because you love practicing. You just love practicing. You say, I practice for its own sake. It doesn't matter if I get, yeah, of course I have goals. I'm trying to get better. but I love practice. I practice for its own sake, right? Some people love swimming. Are you swimming for your health? No, I swim because I love swimming. I swim for its own sake, right? You can listen to music to go to sleep. You can listen to music to relax. You can listen to music to get excited for something, or you can listen to music for its own sake, just for listening to music, right? Amazing how rarely we do that. Usually you listen to music for a reason, okay? A means to an end is a tool to get a job done. I'm using this microphone to record this lesson. You don't use a person as a means to an end. A person must be an end in themselves, and that means they have their own set of goals that you are worried about, right? So if your friend has something good happen to them and it's not anything good for you, just be happy anyway, right? Because your friend is an end in themselves, right? So the relationship between for its own sake and an end in itself is pretty these are pretty close, right? It means doing it for its own goal. Like this class maybe is a means to an end. You just want to graduate, but you're like, okay, I have to get excited about this to graduate, so I'm gonna get some excitement, but it's just a means to an end, right? It's not. I don't want to be a philosopher. Who does? So Kant says, act only on those maxims, rules, which you can will into universal law. So that means if I download Logic Pro for free, because I'm like, oh, I'm a student and I'm just gonna learn how to use it, and then maybe I'll buy it later, maybe never, right? So if what the question to ask is like, oh, if I do this, it's okay because other people are gonna buy it, right? But what if everyone did it? What if everybody did the wrong thing that you, me, what I do, right? What if everybody stole Logic Pro? Well, there would be no, this is Logic 10 that we're on now. There would be no Logic 11, right? So Kant's categorical imperative is real in a lot of ways. In some ways they say, what if everybody lied all the time? Oh, that's not real. But when you look at the music industry, of course, it was real, because as soon as you became able to steal everybody's music online, everybody did it, and recording revenue fell greatly, right? And that was about 20 years ago. Everybody learned that they had the power to download music for free, and then everyone did it, right? So what if it's okay to download music for free? Well, everybody already did, and then we have a very different music industry as a result of that. So there can be no exceptions to Kant's categorical imperative. That's the system he's working with. So don't worry about trying this. We already tried it. Always treat other persons as ends in themselves and never only as means. I must respect your humanity, and I cannot use you as an object. You are not upakan. You are human, right? Of course, you will work with other people in order to try to make things happen, especially in music school. There are so many people here who have skills that you don't have. So you can work with them to make awesome things happen. But you have to respect their humanity and treat them like human beings, right? You guys are awesome. Of course you do this. So let's look at the three main systems that we've looked at so far. Kant famously said we should never lie. Is this something we can will into universal law? We talked about that, right? If everybody tells the truth all the time, what will happen? You just believe everything everyone says all the time, and you probably wouldn't need a lot of the laws that we have. We wouldn't even need contracts, because anybody who talked to you would be telling you the truth all the time, right? What a magical world. And then look at the opposite. What if everybody lied all the time? Language would not make any sense at all. We probably couldn't build anything. Nobody would go to work, right? And it looks funny, but you can see the points along the way that are places that you don't want to be. Okay, so would that bring about the greatest good for the greatest number of people? Well, according to Aristotle, no, because if you're too honest all the time, nobody's going to be happy. You have to find that happy medium, right? If somebody's run into a job interview and you know that they haven't slept and they're really anxious and they look terrible and they have 2 minutes to tang and they're like, how do I look? Do I look okay? You're like, you're going to be great. you're going to be great, right? You don't straight up lie to them, but you don't say, no, you look horrible. I mean, like I've seen you every day this year because we're roommates, and this is the worst that I've ever seen you look in the whole time I've ever known you. You don't become that honest. You don't say that, right? So does banning lying deny individual rights? I think in most cases you could say yes, right? You can't force people to tell the truth if you're a libertarian. They should be free to gamble uh, with their reputation, right? They should be free to say, I'll lie. I'm free to become a liar. But then other people are free to not trust them. And you can run into places where a libertarian will say lying is not okay. Like if you walk into a building and yell the building is on fire, and then everybody runs out of the building scared, you're infringing on their rights as well, right? Okay. So, ethical problems. What about drugs? Is this something that we can will into universal law? What if people said nobody should ever take drugs recreationally or something? This is probably up to your own moral situation here. But if you are somebody who wants to use drugs, then you should ask yourself, do you want to allow really any adults to use drugs? Is that a world that you want to see? A lot of people say yes to that question, right? Does letting it happen bring about the greatest good for the greatest number of people? Well, if you look at Portugal, where they have legalized all of the drugs, there's less addiction and less death from overdose. So the suffering that is associated with drugs has actually gone down. So in a utilitarian world, if we're using science, making all drugs legal would make some people's life bad, maybe because they would try it when they normally wouldn't have tried it, and maybe they'll have some problems because of course drugs can bring you problems. But the model says that overall it might take care of some people, because then people who are overdosing don't feel like they're on the wrong side of the law, so they might be liable to seek help. So for a utilitarian, it would make more sense to do it, right? But people have other moral problems with drugs, and that's why we don't. How about libertarians? Does banning it deny individual rights? Yeah, this one's pretty straightforward. Like, people should be allowed to do what they want with their bodies, they say, right? The place where this is going to start running into you denying other people's rights by getting drunk. Like if you say somebody who gets drunk and then they get violent, then maybe you need to have some kind of penalty that stops that person from getting drunk, because every time this person gets drunk, they lose control of themselves and they're not a free individual anymore. They're acting, crazy. You know a lot of people like this. So you don't know a lot of people like this, but you can think of someone like this, like Sek Loso, drugged up, firing weapons into the sky. He starts to creep into the world where the person who's on drugs seems to be infringing on other people's rights to be safe, right? And that would be the libertarian argument against drugs, but it's a small one, and it doesn't have a lot of ground to stand on. It would just be some violent individuals, and it would only cover drugs and make people violent. So Thailand says it's illegal to sell sexual services, although it's before lockdown, you could see places where it was obvious what was happening, right? Is this a good universal law? And people are going to have different ideas about this, right? Because some people think that sex should just be something that happens in special circumstances and in relationships between people who really mean it when they do it, right? And some people say that it's nothing, and it's something that can be sold. And it's, if you think about it in a Kantian perspective, it's difficult to say where that line is, right? Because you'd have to be setting that line for everybody, right? What it would be a universal law for everybody to follow. Does banning it bring about the greatest good for the greatest number of people? the research is all over the place on this, but that would be, I say research because what would come back would be, you'd be asking questions like, what does it do to violence in the place? What does it do to violence in the place? Like how would the lives of the people who are doing this be, if people are able to engage in it freely and then they don't suffer because they're not criminals? It would look like the utilitarian argument is probably to legalize it, because then nobody is on the wrong side of the law. And if somebody beats one of these people up, they still go to jail. So these people who do this job can feel safe. So the utilitarians would probably say yes. And the libertarians, what about individual rights? They would probably say, let it go, let it be, because one would be free to sell these services if one decided to do it, because the person who's selling the service would be free to sell it, and the person who's the person who's buying it would be free to buy it. But you could say that these people are free, but they're under coercion. They're not totally free, because you can say that market forces are forcing them to do this kind of work when they would otherwise want to live another kind of life. If they go and work like some service industry position or work in a factory or something instead, they would make this much money. But if they do this job, they make that much money. So the market is taking away their freedom by making it far more attractive than their other options. Okay, so that would maybe be the other side of the libertarian argument. Okay, so which theory is the strongest in your point of view? This is up to you. Utilitarianism talks about the greatest good for the greatest number of people. Libertarianism is about individual freedom. You don't make other people do anything, but you don't mess with me, right? Tuo kai tuo mon. Tuo kai tuo mon-ism. Okay? Or Kant's categorical imperative, where every moral action becomes a universal moral law. It becomes an axiom, right? When I decide to not use plastic bags, no one should use plastic bags, right? Because what if no one used plastic bags? None of them would go in the ocean. Good job, right? What if nobody used straws anymore? Well, turtles would need them, it would make the world a better place if everybody followed this. So you can see the categorical imperative in a lot of people's moral choices. You can see libertarianism in people's moral choices, and you can see utilitarianism in there. But which one do you think is the strongest? What's the best? Which one works the most? Which one works in the most situations? Which one focuses on the most important things? People's emotions, people's happiness, people's freedom, or just virtues of what is right, what it means to be a good person. Not about happiness, not about freedom, just about good, right? What do you believe? Feel free to talk about that in the comments. And if you're going to write a paper out of it, you'd have to also talk about why. All right, so that's your quick little review there.